Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really jumping into something vital if you're navigating healthcare and life sciences. We're looking at how the biopharma industry actually creates value.
Yeah, it's a complex world, but crucial to understand.
Exactly. And this is really, for you, maybe you're a healthcare professional thinking about moving into life sciences, or perhaps a strategy leader at a hospital, an AMC, or maybe you're on a business development or clinical innovation team.
Anyone who interacts with biopharma, really.
Our goal here is simple. Unpack how this industry innovates, how it operates, how it makes money, so you can engage more effectively.
Kind of a shortcut through the complexity.
Precisely. Your essential primer on biopharma value creation. Okay, so let's get into it. At its heart, biopharma seems to move through these, stages, right? Turning an idea into a medicine. How does that actually happen? How does a scientific concept become something a doctor prescribes?
It's definitely a process, a long one. Think of it as a value chain with 5 main sequential stages. It all kicks off with discovery.
Discovery, okay.
Right. This is where you're identifying a biological target, finding that vulnerability in a disease that a drug might hit. Then you work on optimizing leads, finding and refining molecules that could potentially hit that target.
And where does this science come from? Internal labs?
Sometimes, yes, internal R&D is a big part, but also, crucially, from partnerships. Academic medical centers, AMCs, are huge here. They do a lot of that cutting-edge translational science, taking basic science from the lab bench and figuring out its clinical relevance.
Bridging the gap.
Exactly. And they often license out that early science, which becomes the foundation for new drugs. So once you have a promising candidate from discovery, it moves into preclinical development.
Preclinical, so before humans.
Right. The main goal is gathering data safety, dosing, toxicology, usually in animal models. This is all to support an investigational new drug application, an IND. You need this before you can test in humans.
Sounds critical.
It is, but it's also a real bottleneck. It's very expensive, and the failure rate here is incredibly high. Lots of potential drugs just don't make it past this point. Maybe they're toxic or they don't get absorbed properly. It's tough. If a candidate does make it through preclinical, then comes clinical development, testing in humans.
Right. The clinical trials we hear about, phases 1, 2, 3.
Exactly. Phase 1 is usually small, focused on safety, sometimes healthy volunteers, sometimes patients. Phase 2 is about finding the right dose and getting the first hints of efficacy. Does it actually seem to work? And phase 3 is the big one. Large-scale trials, often thousands of patients, comparing the new drug to the existing standard of care.
That sounds like a massive undertaking.
Oh, it is. Hugely expensive, very high risk, and long. We're talking maybe 10 to 12 years on average from the lab discovery to getting the drug potentially to market.
10 to 12 years.
Wow. And again, AMCs are vital partners here. They have the infrastructure, the patients, the scientific know-how, but the odds are still tough. It's a well-known statistic, really, that only about 1 in 10 drug candidates that even start clinical trials will eventually get approved.
Only 1 in 10. It's sobering.
It is, and failures aren't always just about efficacy. Sometimes it's manufacturing issues or practical problems with using the drug. It's complex.
Okay, assuming success in the trials, the next step is regulatory approval.
Getting the green light from the FDA or similar bodies elsewhere.
Precisely. You submit a huge package of data. It's called a new drug application, an NDA for traditional small molecule drugs, or a biologics license application, a BLA, for biologics, things like antibodies, gene therapies, more complex stuff made from living systems.
Are there ways to speed this up if it's urgent?
Yes, there are. Things like accelerated approval, breakthrough designation, orphan drug status. These are for drugs addressing serious unmet needs. They can help get treatments to patients faster. And then finally, if you get approval, you hit commercialization, making it available. Sales, marketing, that sort of thing.
That's part of it, but it's also pricing, negotiating market access with payers, educating doctors and patients, medical affairs support after launch. It's the whole process of getting the drug into practice.
That whole chain. It's just an incredible amount of investment, time, and risk. That 1 in 10 statistic really drives it home. So for you listening, maybe you're a clinician, a strategist, a BD lead, understanding that huge upfront gamble, that high failure rate, that's absolutely key.
It sets the context for everything else.
Okay, so it's this long, risky, incredibly expensive path, which I guess begs the obvious question. How do these companies actually fund all this? How do they make it financially viable?
Right. That's where the business model comes in, specifically the branded drug model. When a drug gets approved, it gets market protection, patents, exclusivity periods, usually around 12 to 15 years after approval where they have a legal monopoly.
Okay, so they have a window of protection.
Exactly. And during that window, they can charge high margins. This isn't just about profit, though. Those margins are essential to recoup the massive R&D costs for that drug and critically to pay for all the other drugs that failed along the way.
Ah, so the successes pay for the failures.
In essence, yes. If only 1 in 10 succeeds, that one success has to fund the whole enterprise, or there'd be no incentive to take the risk on the next potential breakthrough. The patent system provides that incentive. And within this, there's a really important category: biologics and specialty drugs.
Things like monoclonal antibodies, gene therapies.
You got it. RNA drugs, too. These are complex, often expensive to make, harder to copy than traditional small molecule generics, and they're very tightly regulated.
What's interesting for, say, hospitals or AMCs?
Well, these drugs often rely heavily on hospital infrastructure. They might need infusion centers for administration, specialized diagnostics to identify the right patients, and things like cold chain logistics, keeping them at super specific low temperatures. That's a big deal. The hospital becomes a key part of actually delivering the therapy.
So, a much closer link to the healthcare provider system.
Definitely. Now, the revenue from any single drug, it follows a predictable pattern. We call it the life cycle curve.
A curve,
Right.
like up and then down.
Pretty much. After launch, there's a ramp up, sales grow, hopefully reach peak, but eventually that patent protection runs out, patent expiry, and then generics or biosimilars enter the market and revenue drops, often sharply.
That's the patent cliff I've heard about.
That's exactly it. And it's not a small dip. It can mean billions in lost revenue for major drugs.
Billions. Wow.
Yeah. Which is why having a strong pipeline of new drugs coming through is absolutely critical for these companies. They have to replace that revenue.
So they try to extend the life of existing drugs too.
They do.
Yeah.
That's called life cycle management. Finding new uses, new indications for the drug, maybe combining it with other treatments or creating a new formulation. Anything to maximize the value before the patent expires, a constant cycle.
It really sounds like a relentless cycle. Always needing the next thing, understanding that life cycle.
Yeah.
It makes sense why they're so focused on the future, on their R&D pipeline.
It's their lifeblood.
Okay, but you mentioned things are changing. This biopharma world isn't static, right? There are shifts happening.
Oh, absolutely. Some really profound shifts are reshaping how they operate and who they need to partner with.
Like what?
Well, one big one is the move from blockbusters to niche busters.
Blockbusters. The billion-dollar drugs for common conditions.
Exactly. That was the old model in many ways. Now there's a much stronger focus on highly targeted therapies. Think orphan drugs for rare diseases affecting maybe only a few thousand people, or precision oncology, where a drug targets a very specific genetic mutation in a cancer.
So smaller patient groups, but maybe higher unmet need.
Precisely. These often mean smaller, more specialized clinical trials. They can command higher prices because they might be the only option. But it also means a bigger need for real-world data to show effectiveness outside of trials. And it often requires sophisticated diagnostics to even find the right patients. It's a different kind of development.
It needs different partners, I imagine.
Absolutely. Partners like AMCs who might have registries of those rare disease patients, or the labs doing the specialized genomic testing, which leads to the next big shift. External innovation is now the norm.
Meaning they're not just relying on their own internal labs anymore.
Much less so. Big pharma companies now acquire or license a huge portion of their pipeline from outside, from smaller biotech firms, from academia, from hospitals. It's about accessing innovation wherever it happens.
So partnerships aren't just nice to have, they're essential.
Totally essential for early co-development, for sharing data, for accessing new technology platforms, and institutions like AMCs with deep clinical data, patient access, trial expertise. You've become absolutely critical allies in this ecosystem, not just vendors, but true partners.
Mm-hmm.
And the third major trend is value-based pressures.
Payers pushing back on costs, demanding proof of value.
Exactly. Governments, insurance companies, they want strong evidence that a new, often expensive drug is truly worth the cost. This is driving things like outcomes-based pricing, especially for really high-cost therapies like gene therapies or some cancer drugs, where payment might be linked to how well the patient actually does.
So how do they prove that real-world value?
That's where real-world data, RWD, becomes so important. Data collected outside trials from electronic health records in hospitals, insurance claims, patient registries. This RWD is crucial for demonstrating that a drug doesn't just work in a perfect trial setting, but that it delivers value for real patients in everyday clinical practice. Hospital systems generating this data hold a really valuable asset now.
Okay, so the focus is shifting to niche areas. Partnerships are essential, and proving real-world value is paramount. If that's the landscape, what does it mean for you listening if you're potentially collaborating or negotiating with BioPharma?
Great question. It means you need to be strategic. First, really understand their risk reward calculus. Remember that $233 billion investment per approved drug, the long timelines, the high failure rate. Their approach to value and pricing stems directly from that reality. It's about managing immense risk.
So appreciate the mountain they're climbing financially.
Yes. Second, know where you create leverage, especially if you're at an AMC or academic institution. Your leverage points are huge. You have scientific discovery, that translational science capability, maybe a new target or biomarker. That's invaluable.
Okay, the core science.
You have the ability to run investigator-led trials generating early crucial data. You have access to specific, often complex patient populations needed for these niche drugs. Our rare disease registry, that's gold.
Patient access, right?
And you have trusted infrastructure for generating high-quality data, including that real-world data, demonstrating efficiency, speed, data integrity that directly addresses their needs. You become a preferred partner. Third piece of advice, speak their language. Using their terms shows you understand their priorities.
Like specific acronyms or concepts.
Exactly. Knowing terms like TAM, total addressable market, that's about the potential size of the prize for them. MOA, mechanism of action, how the drug actually works, essential for scientific discussions. PFS, progression-free survival, a key endpoint, especially in cancer. How long patients live without the disease getting worse. It's a tangible benefit.
Right, PFS, I hear that a lot in oncology.
And QALY, quality-adjusted life year. This is used in health economics. It tries to measure both the length and the quality of life gained. Payers use it to assess value for money.
So understanding these helps align conversations.
Definitely. And finally, align on what they value most. Beyond the science itself, they value speed to market, certainty in the development process, scientific rigor in data, and things that enable market access. If you can show how you help them achieve those goals, you move from being just a collaborator to a truly strategic partner.
That's incredibly practical, not just theory, but actionable insights for anyone interacting with BioPharma, whether you're starting research, planning a trial, or negotiating a partnership.
Exactly. Understanding their drivers gives you leverage.
Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive on how BioPharma creates value. It's clear that understanding their core model, the value chain, the revenue pressures, the strategic shifts, it's foundational.
Their incentives are shaped by risk, regulation, reimbursement. It's a complex interplay.
But their ultimate success, their impact on patients, it really hinges on the quality of their partners. From research labs to hospital systems. And maybe that's the final thought. Institutions like yours, listeners like you, are not just part of the ecosystem. You have the power to actively help shape the future of medicine. One trial, one insight, one patient at a time.